Victoria Chen had built her tech empire on cold logic and harder truths, but nothing in her perfectly controlled world could have prepared her for how a chance encounter with a wounded soldier would shatter every conviction she held dear. As she settled into her first-class seat that fateful morning, she had no idea that within 24 hours she would find herself broken down in tears, confronting the terrible weight of her own prejudice. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning had started precisely as Victoria had orchestrated it, a power breakfast with tech executives, followed by closing a multi-million-dollar deal for her software company. At 38, she had built her empire from scratch, and nothing in her world happened by accident. Every minute was scheduled, every meeting was strategic, and every interaction was calculated for maximum benefit. The flight delay at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport was an unwelcome wrinkle in her otherwise flawless day. Victoria's sleek black heels clicked against the terminal floor as she finally made her way to the boarding gate. Her platinum frequent flyer status meant priority boarding, a privilege she had earned through countless cross-country flights building her technology empire. As she handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, she noticed a small group of uniformed military personnel waiting nearby. She barely suppressed an eye roll. Another flight with self-proclaimed heroes, she thought. The first-class cabin was her sanctuary, a space where she could work undisturbed while enjoying the amenities her success had earned her. As she settled into her window seat, 2A, she pulled out her MacBook Pro, already mentally composing emails to her executive team. The soft leather seat welcomed her as she arranged her workspace with practiced efficiency. Her moment of peace was interrupted by movement in the aisle. A soldier in combat fatigues was struggling to store his worn, military-issued backpack in the overhead compartment. Victoria watched with growing annoyance as he checked his boarding pass and looked at the seat next to hers. She silently prayed he would move on, but fate had other plans. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said politely, his voice carrying a slight southern drawl. "I believe I'm in 2B. Victoria's perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her laptop. Of course, she thought bitterly. Another soldier probably upgraded through some military privilege program. She had earned her first-class seat through years of hard work and dedication, not by wearing a uniform and expecting special treatment. The soldier, whose name tape read Anderson M. Yazos, carefully maneuvered into his seat. Victoria noticed he moved with a slight awkwardness, particularly favoring his right side. She couldn't help but notice that his uniform, while clean, showed signs of wear that seemed out of place in the first-class cabin. "Long day ahead?" he asked, attempting to make friendly conversation. Victoria's response was ice cold. "I prefer not to engage in small talk during flights. Some of us have actual work to do." She emphasized the word actual, with just enough bite to make her meaning clear. The soldier nodded respectfully and turned his attention to a small notebook he pulled from his pocket. Victoria noticed his hands were calloused and scarred, hardly the hands of someone who belonged in first class, she thought dismissively. As other passengers boarded, Victoria observed how flight attendants and fellow travelers kept thanking the soldier for his service. Each time, he responded with a quiet, "Thank you for your support," that only irritated her further. The performance was wearing thin. "I suppose you got some sort of military discount for this seat," she finally remarked, her voice dripping with disdain. The soldier looked at her with steady gray eyes. "No, ma'am. Full fare." Victoria scoffed. "Really? Usually your type expects everything handed to them. Special boarding, special treatment, special everything. As if wearing that uniform automatically makes you worthy of praise." A few nearby passengers shot disapproving glances in her direction, but Victoria was beyond caring. She had built her success in the tech world by being direct and unapologetic. She wasn't about to soften her approach for someone who chose to play soldier for a living. The flight attendant's announcement about takeoff procedures provided a brief reprieve from the tension. Victoria noticed the soldier pulling out a photograph from his breast pocket, studying it with an intensity that only served to annoy her further. "What's that? Your propaganda photo op with some local children?" She sneered, unable to help herself. The soldier's fingers tightened slightly around the photo's edges, but his voice remained steady. No, ma'am, this is my team. Was my team. Something in his tone made Victoria pause for a fraction of a second, but she quickly dismissed the moment of doubt. She had seen this act before. Military personnel playing the hero card, expecting civilians to bow down in gratitude. She turned her attention back to her laptop, determined to ignore her unwanted seatmate for the remainder of the flight. Little did Victoria know that in less than 24 hours, this encounter would shake the very foundations of her carefully constructed world and force her to confront truths that would change her life forever. The 5-hour flight to Washington, D.C. stretched before Victoria like an endurance test. She deliberately angled her body away from the soldier, creating an invisible barrier between them. The pre-flight safety demonstration provided a momentary distraction, but her irritation continued to simmer as she noticed other passengers stealing admiring glances at her seatmate. Sure you didn't get an upgrade through some veterans program? She pressed, unable to let go of her suspicion. The airlines are always falling over themselves to give special treatment to anyone in uniform. The soldier, Anderson, shifted slightly in his seat, and Victoria noticed again how he favored his right side. No, ma'am. I've learned that assuming or expecting special treatment usually leads to disappointment. His measured response only fueled her frustration. Oh, please. I travel every week for business. I see how it works. Priority boarding, extra baggage allowance, upgrade privileges, all because you wear that uniform. Meanwhile, the rest of us actually work for our success. A flash of something, pain, anger, crossed Anderson's face, but his expression quickly returned to its careful neutrality. He reached for his notebook again, and Victoria noticed a tremor in his right hand as he opened it. The pages were filled with what looked like sketches and notes in a cramped, precise handwriting. "What's that supposed to be?" she asked, her tone making it clear she expected another bid for sympathy. "Just some designs," he replied quietly. "Engineering projects I'm working on." Victoria let out an exaggerated sigh. "Let me guess. Some sort of military consulting work? More taxpayer dollars at work?" "Actually," Anderson said, his voice still maintaining its remarkable calm, "they're prosthetic designs. I've been developing more responsive artificial limbs for veterans who've lost—" "Of course," Victoria cut him off. "Another military charity project. You people really know how to work the system, don't you?" A middle-aged woman across the aisle shot Victoria a disapproving look, but she ignored it. The flight attendant approached with the drink cart, offering Anderson a complimentary beverage. "In appreciation for your service." Victoria gestured triumphantly. "See? Special treatment right on cue." "No, thank you," Anderson declined politely. "Just water, please, and I'll pay for it." As the flight progressed, Victoria buried herself in work emails, but she couldn't help noticing how Anderson periodically checked his phone during the brief moments it was allowed. Each time, his expression grew more concerned. During a bout of turbulence, she saw him wince noticeably, his right hand gripping the armrest with white-knuckled intensity. "Combat injury acting up?" she asked, more sarcastic than curious. Anderson was quiet for a moment before responding. "IED in Kandahar. 3 years ago." He paused, then added softly, "Lost more than just fellow soldiers that day." Victoria's retort died on her lips as she caught sight of his right hand again. What she had initially dismissed as a tremor seemed more deliberate now, more mechanical. The sleeve of his uniform shifted slightly, revealing what appeared to be the edge of something metallic. But before she could process this detail, Anderson's phone buzzed again. This time, his face drained of color as he read the message. "Excuse me," he said, rising awkwardly to make his way to the bathroom. Victoria noticed how he used his left hand to brace himself against the seats as he walked. While he was gone, her eyes fell on the notebook he'd left on his seat. One page had fallen open, revealing incredibly detailed technical drawings of what appeared to be a robotic hand assembly. The margins were filled with calculations and notes about nerve response times and sensory feedback mechanisms. Despite herself, Victoria found her professional interest piqued. The designs showed an impressive understanding of both engineering principles and practical application. Anderson returned to his seat looking slightly pale, and Victoria noticed a sheen of sweat on his forehead. He carefully tucked the notebook away and spent the next hour staring silently out the window, his left hand unconsciously rubbing his right forearm. As they began their descent into DC, Victoria's curiosity finally got the better of her professional disdain. "Those prosthetic designs," she began, trying to keep her tone neutral, "they seemed quite advanced." "They need to be," Anderson replied quietly. "When you've lost a limb, every millisecond of response time matters. Every bit of sensory feedback can mean the difference between holding your child safely or—" He trailed off, his voice catching slightly. Victoria felt an unexpected twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but perhaps the first crack in her wall of judgment. But years of cultivating a hard-edged business persona wouldn't crumble so easily. "Well," she said briskly, "I'm sure the military's endless budget will help fund your project." Anderson's response was interrupted by the captain's announcement of their final approach. As they landed, Victoria noticed him checking his phone one final time, his face growing even more troubled. Little did she know that in just a few hours, she would discover exactly why those messages had caused him such distress, and the revelation would force her to confront every assumption she'd made about the man sitting beside her. The arrivals terminal at Reagan National Airport buzzed with activity as Victoria gathered her belongings, deliberately taking her time to avoid walking alongside Anderson. As she made her way toward baggage claim, she overheard him on a phone call, his voice strained with an urgency she hadn't heard during their flight. "I'm here now. Yes. No. The latest test results. I understand. Just keep everything stable until I get there. I'll head straight to Walter Reed. Yes, I know visiting hours are almost over, but this is—" His voice faded into the crowd as Victoria strode ahead, her mind already shifting to her upcoming meetings with government contractors. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the terminal windows as Victoria waited for her designer luggage. She noticed Anderson at the far end of the baggage claim area, struggling slightly to manage his military backpack with his left hand while still on the phone. His right arm hung oddly stiff at his side, a detail she had dismissed during the flight, but now seemed more conspicuous. "Sir, please, I need to speak with Dr. Harrison." "Yes. I know she's in surgery. But when she's out—" "It's about the new prosthetic neural interface. The latest readings are showing rejection signs." More fragments of his conversation drifted over to her, but Victoria pushed them from her mind. She had her own pressing concerns. A dinner meeting with potential investors waited for no one. As she made her way to the taxi stand, she caught one final glimpse of Anderson hurrying toward the airport exit, his movements betraying a sense of barely contained anxiety. For a brief moment, she felt a flicker of curiosity about his urgent calls and troubled expression, but she quickly dismissed it. She had learned long ago that success required focusing on your own goals, not getting entangled in others' dramas. The drive to her hotel took longer than expected, Washington traffic living up to its notorious reputation. Victoria used the time to review her presentation for tomorrow's meeting, a pitch to secure government contracts for her company's artificial intelligence systems. The irony of developing advanced technology while dismissing Anderson's prosthetic designs didn't cross her mind. In her luxury suite at the Four Seasons, Victoria settled into her evening routine. A glass of premium Cabernet in hand, she began scanning her emails and social media feeds on her tablet. A shared post from a military technology news site caught her attention, the headline making her manicured fingers freeze on the screen. "Groundbreaking prosthetic technology at risk. Veteran engineer races against time." The featured image stopped her heart for a moment. There was Anderson, but not in his combat fatigues. The photo showed him in a lab coat, surrounded by complex machinery and prosthetic prototypes. His right sleeve was empty, pinned neatly at the shoulder. With trembling hands, Victoria began to read. Major Michael Anderson, decorated Marine Corps veteran and pioneering prosthetics engineer, faces a critical setback in his groundbreaking neural interface program. The experimental technology, which has allowed Anderson to test the world's most advanced prosthetic arm on himself, is showing signs of rejection after 3 years of successful implementation. Anderson, who lost his right arm and 2 fellow Marines in an IED explosion in Kandahar, has dedicated his post-military career to developing more responsive prosthetic limbs. Using his engineering background and personal experience, He became both researcher and test subject for the revolutionary neural interface system. The current prosthetics available to veterans are functional, but limited, Anderson explained in an earlier interview. We're working to create limbs that don't just move, but feel, that restore not just ability, but sensation. Every veteran deserves the chance to hold their loved ones again with confidence. The experimental program, operating on limited funding due to budget constraints, has been a beacon of hope for thousands of amputee veterans. However, recent complications with Anderson's own neural interface threaten not just his personal mobility, but the entire future of the program. Victoria's wine glass nearly slipped from her fingers as the reality of her earlier behavior came crashing down around her. The man she had dismissed as seeking special treatment was not only a decorated veteran, but a brilliant engineer working to help others like himself. Every movement she had critiqued, every tremor she had judged, suddenly took on a devastating new meaning. The article continued, but Victoria could barely focus through her mounting shame. She thought of his frequent phone checks during the flight, his pained expressions, the technical drawings in his notebook, all pieces of a puzzle she had been too prejudiced to see. With shaking hands, she searched for more information about Anderson and his work. Each new detail felt like a physical blow to her carefully constructed worldview. The man she had accused of playing soldier had not only sacrificed his arm in service, but had transformed his loss into hope for others. While she had been building her fortune in the tech world, he had been building a future for wounded veterans. The most devastating revelation came at the end of another article. Anderson's neural interface program was racing against time not just for his own benefit, but for a young Marine corporal who was scheduled to receive the next prototype. If the current interface failed, years of research and development would be lost, along with the hopes of countless veterans waiting for this technology. As the night deepened outside her luxury hotel window, Victoria Chen, who had prided herself on her sharp business acumen and unshakable judgment, found herself facing a truth that would shatter every preconception she held, and drive her toward a decision that would change not only her life, but the lives of countless others. Victoria barely slept that night, haunted by the magnitude of her misjudgment. Her usual pre-meeting routine lay forgotten as she spent hours researching Anderson's work, each new detail deepening her shame. The neural interface program he'd developed wasn't just innovative, it was revolutionary, combining cutting-edge technology with an intimate understanding of veterans' needs that could only come from personal experience. As dawn broke over the Capitol, Victoria sat surrounded by printouts and open browser tabs on her laptop. She'd learned that Anderson had been an engineering prodigy before joining the Marines, earning his degree from MIT at 22. After losing his arm, he'd channeled his expertise and experience into creating something that could help others like him. The prototype he'd developed and tested on himself had shown unprecedented success in restoring not just movement, but actual sensation. But now, just as the program was ready to help other veterans, everything was at risk. The article mentioned funding constraints, and Victoria's trained business eye caught the implications between the lines. The program's budget had been cut, forcing them to scale back just when they needed to expand. The timing couldn't have been worse. With Anderson's own interface showing signs of rejection, they needed additional resources to solve the problem before it affected other potential recipients. Victoria's fingers hovered over her keyboard as she found the contact information for Walter Reed's prosthetics research department. As CEO of a successful tech company, she had connections that could make a difference. But something held her back. The memory of her cruel words on the plane, her dismissive attitude, her accusations of seeking special treatment. How could she possibly show her face now? Her morning meeting with government contractors was in 3 hours, but for the first time in her career, Victoria wasn't thinking about closing a deal. Instead, she found herself reading about Corporal Martinez, the young Marine who was next in line for Anderson's neural interface technology. Martinez had lost both arms in a helicopter crash during a rescue mission. Her story, accompanied by a photo of her determined smile, struck something deep in Victoria's chest. The sound of her phone's calendar alert startled her from her research. Her meeting would start soon, and she hadn't even begun to prepare. Under normal circumstances, this would have sent her into a panic. These contracts were worth millions to her company. But as she stared at her reflection in the hotel room mirror, all she could see was her own smug expression from yesterday, sneering at a man who had sacrificed more than she could imagine. A plan began forming in her mind. She reached for her phone, not to review her presentation, but to make a different kind of call. "James? It's Victoria. I need you to reschedule today's meeting." "No, all of them. Clear my schedule for the next week." "Yes, I know how important these contracts are, but something more important has come up." Her next call was to her company's legal department. "I need you to draft partnership paperwork immediately. We're going to be working with a military research program." "Yes, I know it's not our usual market. Trust me, this is going to change everything." As she gathered her belongings, Victoria's eyes fell on the newspaper article again. The photo of Anderson in his lab coat, his empty sleeve a stark reminder of his sacrifice, seemed to watch her with the same steady gaze he'd maintained throughout her cruel remarks on the plane. She had judged him for being in first class, never considering that he might have earned that seat through means far more valuable than money. The morning traffic was heavy as her taxi made its way toward Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. Victoria had never felt more uncertain of her reception, more aware of her own failings. She, who had built her reputation on being fearless in business negotiations, found herself dreading the moment she would have to face Anderson again. The hospital's research wing was a maze of corridors and security checkpoints. At each stop, Victoria had to explain who she was and why she was there, each explanation feeling more inadequate than the last. How could she possibly convey that she was here to help when just yesterday she had been the embodiment of everything she now despised? Finally, she found herself outside the prosthetics research lab. Through the window, she could see Anderson working with a team of researchers, his movements precise despite what she now knew must be growing difficulty with his prosthetic arm. The neural interface's rejection wasn't just a technical setback, it was threatening his ability to continue his vital work. Victoria took a deep breath, smoothed her silk blouse, and reached for the door handle. She had spent her career making split-second decisions that affected millions of dollars. But this decision, to walk through this door and face the man she had so grievously misjudged, felt like the most important one of her life. Little did she know that her next steps would not only change her own life, but would set in motion a chain of events that would transform the lives of countless wounded veterans, starting with the brilliant engineer she had once dismissed as just another soldier seeking special treatment. Victoria's hand trembled slightly as she knocked on the laboratory door. Through the glass, she saw Anderson look up from his work, his expression shifting from concentration to surprise as he recognized her. For a moment, she considered turning around, fleeing back to her familiar world of corporate deals and tech innovations. But the weight of her earlier behavior kept her rooted to the spot. "Ms. Chen?" Anderson's voice carried the same quiet dignity it had held on the plane, though now tinged with evident confusion. He stood in the doorway, his lab coat replacing yesterday's fatigues, the empty right sleeve more prominent than ever. Under the harsh laboratory lights, Victoria could clearly see the sophisticated prosthetic arm attached at his shoulder, a marvel of engineering that she had completely failed to appreciate during their flight. "Major Anderson," she began, her carefully prepared speech deserting her. I saw the news articles. About your work. About the neural interface program." She paused, gathering her courage. "I came to apologize. And to help if you'll let me." Anderson studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter the lab. The space was a fascinating blend of medical facility and engineering workshop, with complex machinery and prosthetic prototypes lining the walls. A team of researchers worked quietly at various stations, occasionally shooting curious glances their way. "Why are you here, Ms. Chen?" Anderson asked directly, though without hostility. "Really?" Victoria noticed how he unconsciously rubbed his right shoulder, where the prosthetic connected. The gesture reminded her of his discomfort during the flight, which she had so callously dismissed. "I was wrong," she said simply, "about everything. And when I read about your work, about what you're trying to achieve here, I realized I might be in a position to help." She gestured to a nearby workbench, where complex technical drawings lay scattered, similar to the ones she'd glimpsed in his notebook. "My company specializes in AI and neural network development. The processing challenges you're facing with the sensory feedback loops. That's exactly the kind of problem our technology is designed to solve. Anderson's expression remained careful, but she caught a flicker of interest in his eyes. We've been trying to optimize the response time between neural signals and mechanical execution, he explained, moving to the workbench. The current lag is milliseconds, but in real-world applications, those milliseconds matter. Victoria stepped closer, examining the diagrams. Our latest AI models could help predict and compensate for that lag. Instead of just responding to neural signals, the prosthetic could learn to anticipate them. She paused, then added softly, "But that's not the only reason I'm here." She turned to face him directly. "I read about Corporal Martinez, about how she's waiting for this technology, and about dozens of others like her. Yesterday on the plane, I accused you of seeking special treatment, when in reality, you've dedicated your life to helping others. I've never been so wrong about anything in my life." Anderson was quiet for a moment, absently adjusting something on his prosthetic arm. "The interface rejection is getting worse," he finally admitted. "We're running out of time to solve it, and without additional funding." He trailed off, the implications clear. Victoria reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I had my legal team draw these up this morning. A partnership proposal between your program and my company. Full access to our AI technology, dedicated research support, and initial funding of $5 million. She laid the folder on the workbench, then added, "with an option to increase to $20 million based on progress benchmarks." Anderson stared at the folder, then back at Victoria. "That's substantial. Why?" "Because yesterday I judged you based on a uniform, without bothering to see the person wearing it. Because I dismissed your work without understanding its importance. Because while I've been building a fortune, you've been building hope for people who've sacrificed everything for our country." Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "And because I need to do more with my success than just accumulate more of it." Before Anderson could respond, a commotion at the lab entrance drew their attention. A young woman in a wheelchair was being helped in by a nurse. Victoria recognized her immediately from the photos, Corporal Sarah Martinez. The Marine's empty sleeves were pinned neatly to her shirt, but her bright smile belied her condition. "Major Anderson," Martinez called out cheerfully. "The nurse said you were back. How was your trip to Seattle? Did you get the new components we needed?" Victoria watched as Anderson's professional demeanor softened. "Just got back yesterday, Corporal. And it looks like we might have some good news about the program." He glanced at Victoria, then back at Martinez. "Really good news, actually." As Victoria observed the interaction between the two veterans, one who had found a way to turn his loss into hope for others, and one who waited bravely for that hope to become reality, she realized that her impulsive decision to come here today might be the most important one she'd ever made. But she also knew that this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything she thought she knew about success, sacrifice, and the true meaning of special treatment. The next few hours in the laboratory transformed Victoria's understanding of both the technical challenges and human impact of Anderson's work. As he walked her through the neural interface system, she began to grasp the brilliant complexity of what he had created. The prosthetic arm wasn't just a mechanical replacement. It was an intricate fusion of technology and human neurology that could restore not only movement, but actual sensation. "The breakthrough came when we figured out how to create a two-way communication channel," Anderson explained, demonstrating with his own prosthetic. "It's not just about sending signals from the brain to move the arm. The real challenge was creating artificial sensory feedback that the brain could interpret as touch." As he spoke, his prosthetic hand picked up a small glass vial with remarkable precision. Victoria watched, fascinated, as he manipulated the object with varying pressure. "The current interface allows for different levels of sensory feedback," he continued. "Temperature, pressure, texture, all translated into neural signals the brain can understand. But the rejection issues." He paused, setting down the vial with his natural hand. "The human body is fighting against what it perceives as an invasion." "That's where our AI could help," Victoria interjected, her business mind already racing with possibilities. "By analyzing the pattern of rejection responses, We might be able to develop an adaptive system that adjusts to individual neural patterns. She turned to her laptop, pulling up technical specifications for her company's latest neural network models. As they delved into the technical discussions, Corporal Martinez remained in the lab, her presence a powerful reminder of what was at stake. Victoria noticed how the young Marine watched their work with intense interest, occasionally asking surprisingly insightful questions about the technology that might one day restore her arms. "How long have you been waiting for the interface?" Victoria asked Martinez during a break in their technical discussion. 14 months, Martinez replied, her voice matter-of-fact, but her eyes revealing deeper emotions. "But Major Anderson has been teaching me to work with traditional prosthetics in the meantime. He says it's important to understand the basics before moving to the advanced system." Victoria glanced at Anderson, who was making adjustments to some equipment. "He's a good teacher?" Martinez's face lit up with a genuine smile. "The best. He knows exactly what we're going through because he's been there. When I first woke up in the hospital and realized both my arms were gone, I thought my life was over. But Major Anderson showed me it was just beginning differently." She gestured toward where Anderson worked with her chin. "Watch him sometime. He never asks anyone to do something he hasn't figured out how to do himself first." As if to illustrate her point, Anderson was demonstrating a complex calibration sequence to one of his researchers, his movements precise despite the increasing issues with his neural interface. Victoria noticed the slight tremor in his prosthetic arm, the occasional wince that crossed his face, signs she had dismissed on the plane, but now understood represented a race against time. "The rejection is getting worse, isn't it?" she asked quietly when she had a moment alone with him. Anderson nodded, his expression grave. "The interface is degrading faster than we anticipated. We've got maybe 2 weeks before it fails completely." He flexed his prosthetic hand, the movement slightly jerky. "Once that happens, we lose not just my mobility but all the real-world data we've been collecting. Data we need to perfect the system for Sarah and others." Victoria felt a surge of determination. "Then we don't have a moment to waste. I'll have my best AI team here by tomorrow morning. We'll set up a direct link to our main servers for processing power." She pulled out her phone, already typing rapid instructions to her executive team. "Ms. Chen," Anderson began, but she cut him off. "Victoria," she corrected. "After everything, I think we're past formalities." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Victoria, you understand this is still experimental technology? Even with your resources, there's no guarantee we can solve the rejection issue in time." Victoria looked around the lab, taking in the years of research visible in every prototype, every diagram, every piece of equipment. Her eyes lingered on Martinez, who was chatting with a nurse while watching their conversation with barely concealed hope. "Major Anderson." "Michael," she said, her voice firm. "Yesterday on that plane, I judged you for wearing a uniform. I assumed you wanted special treatment. Now I understand. You're not asking for special treatment. You're working to give people back their normal lives." She met his steady gaze. "Whatever it takes, however long it takes, my company's resources are at your disposal." As she spoke, Victoria realized that her words represented more than just a business commitment. They marked the beginning of her own transformation, from a woman who had built walls of prejudice and privilege around herself to someone who might actually make a difference in the world. The irony wasn't lost on her that it had taken a chance encounter with a man she had so grievously misjudged to show her what real value looked like. The next week passed in a whirlwind of activity. Victoria's corporate efficiency combined with Anderson's military precision created a powerful synergy in the lab. Her AI team arrived as promised, bringing with them state-of-the-art equipment and fresh perspectives on the neural interface challenge. The laboratory transformed into a 24/7 operation, with researchers working in shifts to maximize every precious moment before Anderson's interface failed completely. Victoria found herself spending every waking hour at the lab, her hotel suite gathering dust, her designer suits replaced by practical slacks and lab coats. She watched in awe as Anderson pushed through his increasing discomfort, working tirelessly to document every aspect of his neural interface's performance while it was still functioning. "These readings are critical," he explained one evening, wincing as he adjusted his prosthetic arm. Every piece of data we collect now could be the key to preventing rejection in future recipients. Even as his own interface degraded, his focus remained firmly on those who would come after him. Victoria had set up a temporary office in a corner of the lab, coordinating between her AI team and Anderson's researchers. She couldn't help but notice how the military personnel who frequented the lab, both staff and patients, treated Anderson with a respect that went far beyond his rank. It wasn't the theatrical show of deference she had once scorned, but something deeper, born of shared experience and genuine admiration. "He saved my life in Kandahar," a young sergeant told her quietly one afternoon as they watched Anderson work. "Not during the IED attack, after it. I lost my leg, was in a dark place. The major showed me how to live again, how to turn loss into purpose." The sergeant gestured to his prosthetic leg. "Now I'm part of the testing program for the new sensory feedback system in lower limb prosthetics." These stories became a regular occurrence. Victoria learned that Anderson had built more than just a research program. He had created a community of hope. Every veteran who came through the lab doors found not just technical support, but understanding, encouragement, and a sense of purpose. Late one night, as they pored over the latest data readings, Victoria noticed Anderson struggling more than usual with his prosthetic arm. "We should take a break," she suggested, concerned by the pallor of his face. "Can't waste time," he replied, though he couldn't quite hide his grimace. "The interface degradation is accelerating. Look at these response times." He pulled up a graph showing the increasing delay between neural signals and mechanical response. Victoria studied the numbers, her heart sinking. Despite their intense efforts, they hadn't yet cracked the rejection problem. Her AI teams had made progress in predicting and compensating for the lag, but the underlying issue remained. The human body was fighting against the interface itself. "There has to be something we're missing," she muttered, scrolling through pages of data. Her eyes were burning from staring at screens, but she refused to stop. The stakes were too high. "Victoria," Anderson said softly, "you need to consider the possibility that—" "No," she cut him off firmly. "We are not giving up. My entire career I've solved problems by looking at them from every possible angle. We just haven't found the right angle yet." Anderson smiled slightly, though his eyes were tired. "You know, when you first walked into the lab last week, I thought you were here out of guilt." Victoria felt her cheeks flush with shame at the memory of her behavior on the plane. "I was, partially," she admitted, "but now—" She gestured to the lab around them, to the prototypes and diagrams and computers running endless simulations. "Now, I understand what you're really building here. It's not just prosthetics, it's possibility." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the lab entrance. Corporal Martinez was there, out of breath, her face glowing with excitement. "Major!" The new sensory pad prototypes arrived from the manufacturer. Anderson's face lit up despite his obvious fatigue. The sensory pads were a crucial component of the neural interface system, responsible for translating physical sensations into neural signals. The new versions had been specially manufactured to Victoria's AI team's specifications, incorporating their latest algorithms for rejection response prediction. As they unpacked the prototypes, Victoria watched Anderson's hands, one flesh, one mechanical, working in sync despite the increasing interface issues. She thought about how far she'd come from being the woman who had sneered at him on the plane, judging him for occupying space in first class. Now she understood that the real measure of a person had nothing to do with where they sat on an airplane, and everything to do with how they chose to use their gifts to help others. The next few hours would prove crucial in their race against time. As they prepared to test the new prototypes, Victoria silently promised herself that she would not let Anderson's vision fail. She had built her fortune on developing technology that made lives easier. He had dedicated his life to making broken lives whole again. Somewhere in the intersection of their different worlds lay the solution they desperately needed. They just had to find it in time. The breakthrough came at 3:47 a.m., in that strange liminal space where exhaustion meets inspiration. Victoria had been staring at neural response patterns for so long that the numbers had started to blur together. Anderson was at his workstation, his prosthetic arm now noticeably jerky in its movements, still pushing through his increasing discomfort to document every detail of the interface's degradation. Wait. Victoria suddenly sat up straight, her tired eyes widening. Michael, look at this pattern. She quickly transferred the data to the main screen. The rejection response isn't random. It's cyclical. The interface isn't failing continuously. It's failing in a predictable pattern. Anderson moved to her station, wincing as he adjusted his prosthetic. Show me the timeline correlation. Victoria's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up months of data. Look, the rejection responses spike at regular intervals. We've been trying to stop the rejection entirely, but what if we work with it instead? What if we design the interface to adapt to these cycles? The possibility energized them both. They spent the next hours developing a new approach. Instead of fighting the body's natural rejection response, they would create an adaptive system that could predict and compensate for these cycles. Victoria's AI team was called in, bleary-eyed but excited, and the lab hummed with renewed purpose. It's like teaching the interface to dance with the immune system instead of fighting it, one of Victoria's AI specialists explained as they modified their algorithms. We let it pull back when rejection peaks, then re-engage when the response subsides. Anderson's expertise proved crucial in translating the theoretical approach into practical application. The prosthetic's sensitivity would need to adjust dynamically, he noted, sketching modifications to the sensory pad design. But if we can maintain even a reduced connection during rejection peaks, it's better than complete failure. They worked through the morning, fueled by coffee and determination. Victoria watched Anderson closely, noting how he unconsciously rubbed his right shoulder more frequently. The current interface was failing faster now, but their new approach offered hope, if they could implement it in time. Corporal Martinez arrived mid-morning, earlier than her usual therapy session. She had become a regular presence in the lab, her optimism and determination inspiring everyone around her. Today, she noticed the heightened energy immediately. Something's different, she observed, looking between Victoria and Anderson. You've found something, haven't you? Victoria shared a look with Anderson before explaining their potential breakthrough. As she outlined the new approach, she was struck by how naturally technical terms now flowed from Martinez's lips. Terms the young Marine had learned through sheer determination to understand the technology that might one day restore her arms. So instead of trying to prevent rejection entirely, you're teaching the interface to work around it, Martinez asked, demonstrating her growing grasp of the technology. Exactly, Anderson confirmed, pulling up a simulation on the main screen. Think of it like waves in the ocean. Instead of building a wall to stop them, we're teaching the interface to ride them. Victoria watched their interaction with a warm appreciation. She had come to understand that this was Anderson's true gift, not just his brilliant engineering mind, but his ability to make complex concepts accessible, to turn technical challenges into human solutions. It was a far cry from the special treatment she had once accused him of seeking. The day progressed with intense focus. Initial simulations showed promise, but translating theory into practical application presented new challenges. They needed to modify both the hardware and software of the interface system, all while racing against the deterioration of Anderson's current prosthetic connection. Late in the afternoon, during a brief break, Victoria found Anderson alone in the testing area, struggling to complete a basic calibration sequence with his prosthetic arm. The tremors were worse now, the lag between neural impulse and mechanical response increasingly noticeable. Michael, she said softly, let me help. He looked up, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw the toll this was taking. Not just physically, but emotionally. I keep thinking about that day in Kandahar, he said quietly. When I lost my arm, I thought I'd lost everything. But then I realized I had a choice. Let it destroy me, or use it to help others who would face the same challenge. Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes as she remembered her cruel words on the plane. And now you're facing that challenge all over again. He managed a small smile, but not alone this time. He looked around the lab, at the teams of researchers working tirelessly on their breakthrough. You know, when you first offered your company's help, I was skeptical. I thought it was just corporate PR or guilt. I've never been so glad to be wrong. Victoria touched his shoulder gently. That makes two of us being wrong about each other. She straightened up, her business resolve returning. Now, let's make this work. We've got too many people counting on us to fail. As they returned to their work, Victoria realized that their race against time had become about more than saving one prosthetic interface. It had become about proving that when humanity's best qualities came together, innovation, determination, compassion, there was no challenge too great to overcome. Over the next 48 hours, the laboratory transformed into a crucible of innovation and determination. Victoria's AI team worked in continuous shifts, refining algorithms and running countless simulations of their adaptive interface design. Anderson's researchers focused on modifying the hardware to accommodate the new approach, while Anderson himself pushed through increasing difficulty with his failing prosthetic to provide crucial feedback. The sensory response is down to 47% now, Anderson reported, his voice tight with controlled pain as they tested his prosthetic's diminishing functionality. The tremors were near constant now, and simple tasks that had been effortless a week ago required intense concentration. Yet he persisted, meticulously documenting every change in sensation and response time. Victoria had completely forgotten about her abandoned business meetings. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from concerned board members and confused clients, but she ignored them all. Her entire world had narrowed to this laboratory and the race to perfect their breakthrough before Anderson's interface failed completely. The latest simulation shows promise, one of her AI specialists announced, pulling up complex neural response patterns on the main screen. The adaptive algorithm is successfully predicting rejection cycles with 89% accuracy. The team gathered around, analyzing the data with intense focus. Corporal Martinez had become an unofficial member of the research team, her unique perspective as a future recipient proving invaluable. But what about the sensory feedback during the peak rejection periods? She asked, pointing to a specific data pattern. Even reduced sensation would be better than none at all. Anderson nodded approvingly at her observation. She's right. We need to maintain at least minimal sensory connection throughout the cycle. He attempted to demonstrate a precision grip with his prosthetic hand, but the movement was jerky and uncontrolled. Victoria saw him clench his jaw against obvious frustration. The sight spurred her into action. What if we created variable sensitivity thresholds? She moved to the whiteboard, sketching rapidly. The interface could automatically adjust its sensory input based on the predicted rejection levels, like automatic brightness adjustment on a smartphone screen. The concept energized the team. Anderson's engineers began modifying the sensory pad designs while Victoria's AI specialists refined the predictive algorithms. Hours blended together as they worked, their focus absolute. Victoria found herself moving between teams, coordinating efforts and ensuring no detail was overlooked. Late that night, as they prepared for their first full system test, Victoria noticed Anderson standing alone by the window. The city lights cast shadows across his face, highlighting his exhaustion. She approached quietly, holding out a cup of coffee. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked softly. Anderson accepted the coffee with his natural hand, his prosthetic arm now hanging nearly useless at his side. "I keep thinking about that photo I was looking at on the plane," he said. "The one you assumed was propaganda." Victoria felt the familiar stab of shame at the memory, but Anderson continued. "It was my team from Kandahar, the ones we lost in the IED attack. Williams had a daughter Sarah's age. Morris was working on his engineering degree." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "I survived to help others like us. I can't fail them now." Victoria placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "We won't fail. Look how far we've come already." She gestured to the lab behind them, where both their teams worked with singular purpose. "A week ago, I was a tech CEO who thought she had all the answers. You showed me what real innovation looks like, not just advancing technology, but using it to restore humanity." Their moment was interrupted by excited calls from the testing area. The first prototype incorporating their adaptive interface design was ready for initial trials. The tension in the lab was palpable as they began the testing sequence. Anderson sat in the testing chair, his current prosthetic carefully removed. Victoria stood nearby, her heart racing as the engineers attached the new prototype. The room fell silent as they initiated the neural connection. "Commencing sensory feedback test," the lead engineer announced. "Major, please report any sensation." Anderson's face was concentrated as the first signals passed through the new interface. "I feel pressure. Light, but clear." His voice held carefully controlled hope. "Moving to temperature sensitivity test." Victoria held her breath as they progressed through the testing sequence. The new prototype's movements were smoother than Anderson's previous prosthetic had been in days, though still not perfect. But it was his face that told the real story, the look of wonder as sensation returned to his prosthetic hand. "The rejection damping is working," one of the AI specialists reported, monitoring neural response patterns. "System is automatically adjusting sensitivity levels to maintain connection." For the first time in days, Victoria felt tears of joy rather than frustration or exhaustion. They hadn't just found a workaround for the rejection problem. They had potentially discovered a whole new approach to neural interface technology. But as she watched Anderson carefully testing the prototype's capabilities, she knew their work was far from over. This was just the first step in a longer journey, one that would hopefully lead to Corporal Martinez and countless other veterans regaining not just movement, but genuine sensation and control. The dawn was breaking over Washington as they concluded the initial tests, bathing the lab in golden light. It felt fitting, a new day bringing new hope for everyone involved in this remarkable journey. The next few days were crucial in validating their breakthrough. Victoria leveraged her corporate connections to expedite production of additional prototypes, incorporating their adaptive interface design. Anderson worked tirelessly with both teams to refine the system, his own experience with the prototype providing invaluable feedback for improvements. "The sensory adaptation is remarkably stable," he reported during one testing session, demonstrating fine motor control that had been impossible just days before. "Even during peak rejection periods, we're maintaining basic functionality and sensation." The prototype wasn't perfect. They could still detect slight variations in response times, but it was a revolutionary step forward. Victoria had set up a command center in the lab, coordinating between her company's manufacturing facilities and the research team. Her assistant in Seattle was bewildered by the stream of urgent requests and redirected resources, but Victoria had never been more certain of any decision in her life. "Ms. Chen," her CFO had called, concern evident in his voice. "The board is asking questions about the sudden allocation of resources to this military project. They're worried about shareholder reaction." Victoria's response was immediate and firm. "Schedule an emergency board meeting. I'll present the project myself. Once they understand what we're developing here, they'll realize this isn't just good ethics. It's good business." She knew her company's neural network technology would advance years ahead through this collaboration. Corporal Martinez had become their most dedicated test observer, her keen insights helping them refine the user experience aspects of the interface. "It's not just about having arms again," she explained to Victoria during a break. "It's about regaining independence, dignity." The major understood that from the beginning. Victoria watched as Anderson worked with his team, noting how he alternated between his original prosthetic and the new prototype, documenting every difference in response and sensation. His dedication was unwavering, even as fatigue showed clearly on his face. "The original interface is almost completely degraded now," he admitted to her quietly. "Without the new prototype, I'd have lost nearly all function. You did more than just help the program, Victoria. You helped me keep my promise to others waiting for this technology." The moment was interrupted by an urgent call from Victoria's manufacturing team. The first batch of production prototypes was ready for testing. The lab buzzed with excitement as the shipment arrived, each unit representing hope for veterans waiting for the technology. "We'll need to begin human trials soon," Anderson said, examining the new units. Starting with me," Martinez interrupted, rolling her wheelchair forward. Her face was set with determination. "I've been studying this system for months. I understand the risks and the potential. I'm ready." Victoria watched the exchange, remembering how she had once dismissed the bonds between these veterans as mere theatrical show. Now she understood the depth of trust and commitment that flowed through this community. The preparation for Martinez's initial fitting began immediately. Victoria's AI team worked to calibrate the neural response algorithm specifically for dual-arm prosthetics, while Anderson's engineers made final adjustments to the hardware. The atmosphere in the lab was charged with anticipation and nervous energy. "We'll start with the right arm," Anderson explained during the pre-procedure briefing. "Once we confirm stability with the adaptive interface, we'll proceed with the left." His voice carried the weight of personal experience, understanding exactly what this moment meant. Victoria found herself holding her breath as the first prosthetic was carefully attached. Martinez sat straight in her chair, her face a mixture of hope and determination. Anderson stood nearby, monitoring every step of the process, his own prototype arm a testament to the technology's potential. "Initiating neural connection," the lead technician announced. The room fell silent as they waited for Martinez's response. The young Marine's eyes widened. I can feel it," she whispered. "It's like a tingling, but real." Tears began rolling down her cheeks as she watched her new prosthetic hand respond to her thoughts, fingers moving slowly but deliberately. Victoria felt her own eyes welling up as she watched Martinez grasp a small foam ball, her first independent grip in over a year. The moment represented everything they had worked for, everything Anderson had envisioned when he first began developing the technology. "The adaptive interface is functioning perfectly," one of the AI specialists reported, monitoring the neural response patterns. "Rejection markers are present, but the system is compensating automatically, just as designed." Anderson placed his hand, his natural hand, on Martinez's shoulder. "Welcome back, Corporal," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. Victoria stood slightly apart, watching the scene unfold. She thought about the woman she had been on that plane, so quick to judge, so certain of her own superiority. That woman could never have imagined being part of something so profound, so transformative. As Martinez continued her initial testing, Victoria's phone buzzed with a message from her PR team. News of their breakthrough had leaked, and media requests were pouring in. They wanted interviews, photos, statements about the collaboration between her tech company and the military research program. But watching Martinez grasp objects with her new hand, seeing the joy on her face and the pride on Anderson's, Victoria knew that no press release could capture the real story. It wasn't about technology or business success. It was about humanity, about turning prejudice into purpose, and about the remarkable things that could happen when people chose to see beyond their own assumptions. The success of Martinez's initial prosthetic fitting sparked a wave of hope throughout the veteran community. News spread quickly through military channels, and Walter Reed began receiving inquiries from around the country. Victoria found herself working alongside Anderson to develop a comprehensive rollout plan for the new technology. "We need to be systematic about this," Anderson explained during a planning session. "Each case will require custom calibration of the adaptive interface." He was working with both arms now, his original prosthetic completely replaced by the new prototype, which functioned with remarkable stability. Victoria nodded, her business acumen melding seamlessly with his medical expertise. "My company can set up regional training centers," she suggested. "We'll need to certify technicians in both the AI calibration and the physical fitting processes." Martinez's progress became their proof of concept. Within days of her first fitting, she had gained remarkable control over her right prosthetic arm. The adaptive interface performed exactly as designed, maintaining functionality even during rejection response cycles. The success led them to schedule her left arm fitting sooner than originally planned. "It's not just the physical capability," Martinez explained to a group of visiting medical officials. "It's the sensation. I can feel different textures, temperatures. I can hold things without watching my hands constantly." She demonstrated by picking up a delicate glass of water, the prosthetic fingers adjusting automatically to apply just the right pressure. Victoria had practically moved into the lab, coordinating between her corporate headquarters and the medical center. Her board of directors, initially skeptical, had become enthusiastic supporters after seeing the technology's potential. The company's stock had surged on news of the breakthrough, though Victoria barely noticed. Her focus had shifted entirely to helping as many veterans as possible. "We've received 57 new applications for the program," she told Anderson one evening, reviewing data on her tablet. "Each one represents a story, a life waiting to be restored." Anderson was quiet for a moment, absently flexing his prosthetic hand. "You know, when you first walked into this lab, I thought you were here out of guilt or corporate opportunism." He smiled. "I've never been happier to be wrong about someone." Victoria felt her cheeks flush, remembering their first encounter on the plane. "I was the one who was wrong. About everything." She gestured to Martinez, who was across the lab, confidently manipulating small objects with her new prosthetic. "This is what real success looks like." The days fell into a new rhythm. Mornings were spent refining the technology based on feedback from Martinez and Anderson. Afternoons often brought visitors, military officials, medical researchers, potential recipients and their families. Each evening, Victoria and Anderson would review the day's data, planning next steps and discussing improvements. One particular evening, as they were analyzing the latest neural response patterns, Anderson received an unexpected visitor. A tall, distinguished man in an Army general's uniform entered the lab, causing everyone to snap to attention. "General Phillips, sir," Anderson said, standing straight despite his evident fatigue. "We weren't expecting you." The general waved away the formality. "At ease, everyone. I'm here unofficially." He looked around the lab, his eyes lingering on Martinez as she confidently worked with both prosthetic arms. "I've been hearing remarkable things about your breakthrough here." Victoria watched as Anderson demonstrated the adaptive interface technology, explaining how it worked with the body's natural rejection responses rather than fighting them. The general's face showed increasing interest as he understood the implications. "This isn't just an advancement in prosthetics," General Phillips said finally. "This is a paradigm shift in how we care for our wounded warriors." He turned to Victoria. "And I understand we have you to thank for making this possible, Ms. Chen." Victoria shook her head. "I only provided resources. Major Anderson is the one who developed the technology. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I learned what real service means through this project." The general smiled knowingly. "Sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come from unexpected collaborations." He turned back to Anderson. "The Pentagon is very interested in expanding this program. We're preparing to allocate significant additional funding." The news sent a wave of excitement through the lab. Additional funding meant helping more veterans, expanding research, developing new applications for the technology. But as Victoria watched Anderson's measured response to the general's announcement, she realized something profound had changed in her own understanding of success. A month ago, she would have seen this as a business triumph. New contracts, government backing, expanded market opportunities. Now she saw it through different eyes. Each dollar of funding represented another veteran who might regain not just mobility, but dignity and independence. Each research advancement meant another family finding hope in the midst of challenge. As the general departed, leaving behind promises of support and resources, Victoria found herself standing by the lab's window, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Anderson joined her, both of them taking a moment to absorb the implications of this new development. "We're going to need to expand the facility," she said thoughtfully. "Set up proper training programs for technicians. Maybe establish satellite centers near major military hospitals." Anderson nodded, his prosthetic hand moving with natural grace as he adjusted his lab coat. "Think about where we were just 2 weeks ago, when you first walked into this lab." "When I was still the woman who judged a soldier for sitting in first class," Victoria finished quietly. "I had no idea that flight would change everything." 6 months later, Victoria stood at a podium in Walter Reed's main auditorium, addressing a room filled with military personnel, medical professionals, and media representatives. The occasion was the official launch of the National Adaptive Neural Interface Program, a joint initiative between her company and the Department of Defense. "When I boarded a flight to Washington, D.C. half a year ago," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the packed room, I thought I knew everything about success. I had built a technology empire, earned every luxury I enjoyed, and believed that entitled me to judge others. She paused, looking at Anderson, who sat in the front row, his adaptive prosthetic arm now functioning flawlessly. I was wrong about everything that truly matters. The audience listened intently as she described their breakthrough with the adaptive interface technology. Behind her, a large screen showed before and after videos of veterans who had received the new prosthetics. Each clip told a story of restored independence, of lives transformed. But this program isn't just about technology, Victoria continued. It's about understanding that true innovation comes from combining different perspectives, from looking beyond our prejudices to see the potential in unexpected partnerships. Corporal Martinez, now a full-time program coordinator, demonstrated her dual prosthetics with confident grace. She had become the program's most effective advocate, her personal journey inspiring others facing similar challenges. The sight of her confidently manipulating complex objects with both prosthetic arms never failed to move Victoria deeply. After the presentation, during the reception, Victoria found herself standing next to Anderson, watching as Martinez guided a group of potential recipients through the basics of the interface technology. "Remember when you accused me of seeking special treatment?" Anderson asked, a gentle smile playing at his lips. Victoria felt the familiar flush of shame, but Anderson continued, "You helped create something truly special instead. This program will help thousands of veterans rebuild their lives." The program had already fitted 37 veterans with the adaptive prosthetics, with hundreds more scheduled in the coming months. Victoria's company had established training centers near major military hospitals across the country, and research was underway to adapt the technology for civilian medical applications. "I've been thinking about that flight," Victoria said quietly. "About how quick I was to judge you, to dismiss your sacrifice. I needed to believe that success was something you earned through cutthroat business dealings and looking down on others." She watched as a young veteran across the room excitedly showed his new prosthetic hand to his tearful family. "You taught me that real success is measured by how many lives you touch, not by how many people you step over." The reception area was filled with similar scenes, veterans demonstrating their prosthetics, families embracing, medical professionals discussing future applications of the technology. Each interaction represented a story of hope, a life changed, a future restored. "Your company's stock has tripled since we announced the program," Anderson noted. "Turns out doing good can be good business too." Victoria laughed softly. "The old me would have cared about that. Now." She gestured to the room full of transformed lives. "This is what matters." As the evening wound down, Victoria found herself back at the podium for a final announcement. "Today, we're not just celebrating a technological breakthrough," she declared. "We're celebrating the power of second chances, the chance to regain what was lost, the chance to see beyond our prejudices, the chance to redefine what success truly means." She announced the establishment of the Anderson Martinez Foundation, dedicated to ensuring that every veteran who needed the adaptive interface technology would receive it, regardless of their financial situation. The room erupted in applause as she revealed her personal commitment of $50 million to launch the foundation. Later that night, as the last guests departed, Victoria stood in the now quiet laboratory where it had all begun. The space had evolved, expanded, but still held the essence of those intense days when they had raced against time to perfect the adaptive interface. Anderson joined her, his prosthetic hand holding 2 cups of coffee, a simple gesture that would have been impossible 6 months ago. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, echoing her words from that crucial night of breakthrough. Victoria accepted the coffee, smiling at the memory. "I was just thinking about how life's biggest lessons often come from our worst moments. That day on the plane I was horrible to you because I was afraid that success built on judgment and privilege might not be success at all." "And now?" Anderson asked quietly. Victoria looked around the lab, at the pictures of smiling veterans with their new prosthetics, at Martinez locking up her office for the night, at the prototype that had started it all. "Now I understand that true success isn't about what you have, it's about what you give. It's about turning moments of judgment into opportunities for growth, about using your resources to lift others up instead of pushing them down. As they walked out of the lab together, Victoria realized that her journey from that prejudiced woman on the plane to who she was now had been its own kind of adaptive interface, learning to work with her flaws rather than against them, to turn past mistakes into future purpose, and to understand that the greatest achievements come not from rising above others, but from helping others rise. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.